Hey everyone, my name is Scott and welcome to the channel and a show called What I've Been Watching, where I talk about what I've been watching. Let's talk about Aftermath so we can get to Hunger Games. Aftermath stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as a grieving father after his wife and pregnant daughter are killed in an airplane accident. This accident is caused by negligence on behalf of the air traffic controller. Schwarzenegger is not really known to be a big drama guy, but he's actually very good in this film as this grieving father who just wants an apology. He wants someone to recognize his pain and say that they're sorry. But it's a quiet and solemn performance from Schwarzenegger, who's not known for quiet and solemn performances. But there's this weird disconnect with the movie between the performance of its main actor and the resolution that happens in the third act. How Arnold is acting throughout the entire movie leads to the third act being somewhat out of character for this person. I didn't believe any of it. So when it happened, it was shocking to me because it didn't seem like an inevitability based on what we know about this guy leading up to it. It seemed like it was made to shock you. And it all leads to one of the most lackluster endings I've seen since the movie Sliver. So Schwarzenegger is very good here, but he's packaged in a movie that doesn't deserve this performance. All right, Hunger Games. So I want to preface Hunger Games off the top with two thoughts. The first one is I have read the books. Well, the first three. I haven't read the newest one, which I believe is a prequel, if I remember right. So I do know the source material. The first two are fine. I'm not a huge fan of the third book, but I did enjoy my time through the series for the most part. And my other thought when it comes to the Hunger Games is my thought about book to film adaptations. A movie is never going to encapsulate an entire book. It's just not. Books have hundreds and hundreds of pages to give you exposition, character development, descriptions of places, things that you don't get within a movie. And what a book has going for it that a movie doesn't is your imagination. The movie in your head is always going to be 100 times better than the movie that they make. So for me, it's completely impossible for a movie to completely replicate a book. So what I look for when I go into these adaptations is, did the movie capture the spirit of the story? Did it capture the same tones? Did it hit the same beats? Did it get in the ballpark of the book? Or on the opposite side of things, did it do something drastically different? When I say that, I'm thinking of the movie Room with Brie Larson. If you've read the book that movie is based on, the book is drastically different than the movie. The movie is great. The book is a memorable reading experience, but I don't think it would have translated well to film. So this change is warranted. So when I watch these, it's not, did they recreate the book on film? It's how close did they get? And that brings us to the first movie, The Hunger Games. It's directed by Gary Ross and stars Jennifer Lawrence as our heroine, Katniss Everdeen. For those of you who might not know the story, Katniss' sister is selected to enter a contest called The Hunger Games, which is held in this world every year, where whoever wins this fight to the death, their district gets food and prizes for an entire year. Hence the title, The Hunger Games. Then the winners also live on in infamy. So anyway, Katniss is not cool with her young sister going to fight to the death, so she volunteers as tribute, and now she's going to the Hunger Games, leaving her family behind and the boy that she's friends with, but isn't necessarily romantically linked to. She's paired with Peeta, who is played by Josh Hutcherson, and then they go into the arena and experience the setup to and fight of the Hunger Games. So rewatching this film, I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of this first one. And I don't think it was at the time that I saw it originally either. Mostly because I don't think it faithfully recreates the relationships within the book, or even comes close to it. And this book is all about relationships, how you work with other people, work against other people. And this movie just doesn't do a very good job of rendering those relationships. I'm thinking about two situations specifically. The first one being the love triangle between Gale, Peeta, and Katniss. It's a romantic triangle, but the movie doesn't seem to think it is. At least it doesn't render it as so. It's more of a love triangle of convenience for Katniss. And Katniss isn't the type of character that's going to sit there and lay out her feelings. So without hearing her thoughts, it doesn't quite come out on film. And it's a huge part of the series going forward. And that's a big problem with this movie. And the other relationship I'm thinking about is the relationship between Katniss and Rue, which is the main storyline, the main dramatic thread through the first book. And it's basically non-existent here. But the movie wants to have the same outcome as the book. So it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to pare down the running time, but it also wants to have the emotional impact of Rue's story. And tries to do so in just a few amount of scenes, and it doesn't work. To the point that when Katniss says in the second movie, "Rue is my friend," I thought, is she? I mean, we only got a handful of scenes with those two together. Were they friends? I don't know. They seem more like acquaintances. When you have a movie that's about relationships and you have just a few scenes to make those relationships work, they better work, and some of them don't. Some of them actually do work. Some of the actors make this material work. I'm thinking about Woody Harrelson, who steals every scene he's in. And the heart of the story is Lenny Kravitz as Cinna. He's great. In just a handful of scenes, he is a very warming presence to Katniss. And you feel that almost immediately when he shows up on screen. So those two actors pull it off. But for the most part, the storylines that need to resonate really don't with this one. And add to this that the assembly of the film is bad and the cinematography is terrible. The cinematography you can blame on the time period. I mean, most action movies of that time period were very handheld oriented. But the assembly of the movie is almost inexcusable. There was a video going around Twitter a month or so ago of this edit.
I volunteer as tribute.
It is one of the biggest emotional moments of your movie, and there's a jump cut in it. And it's fine if you've used jump cuts up until that point and you're trying to make a point with your filmmaking language, but it just looks like a bad edit. But that's not even the worst in that scene. Just a few seconds later, this shot transfers to this shot. What about that second shot made director Gary Ross think, you know what needs to be in my movie? That one. Everything's shaky, and because everything's shaky, everything looks bad, and you can't focus on anything because everything's bouncing around constantly. There is a point in time in this film when shaky cam would have worked, and that is the entrance and initial goings of the Hunger Games. The opening of the arena is chaotic, so shoot it as such. But when everything up until that point is shaky, then it really doesn't have an impact, cinematically speaking. But overall, this movie's fine. It's fine. I mean, it doesn't blow me out of the water. It didn't then, it doesn't now. It's frustrating more than anything that they were given relatively decent source material and did this with it? Seems like a bit of a missed opportunity. That leads us to Catching Fire, directed by Francis Lawrence, also starring Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, and Liam Hemsworth. This movie is loads better. Like, everything about this movie is just better. The relationships are rendered better. There's more nuance to how the characters relate to each other. The acting overall is better. There's a couple scenes in the first movie where Liam Hemsworth is not at his strongest. But here, everybody's really good. Woody Harrelson continues to steal the show. Lenny Kravitz is great. Donald Sutherland as President Snow is menacing. Like, everybody in this movie does really nice work. And behind the camera is nice too. Francis Lawrence brings a cinematic view to this film. Everything looks great, and everything's not so damn shaky. There is shaky cam, because that was the style at the time, but it is done in the right places. It's not constant. And because of that, the film looks really great. This movie also has one of the coolest CinemaScope letterbox to IMAX aspect ratio changes I've seen in a film. It does it in the perfect place. It holds it throughout the entire arena and then comes back when they're out of it. It is a great stylistic choice on Francis Lawrence's behalf. And even the screenplay is better. Like, in the first movie, you don't get a sense of who the other people in the arena are. Now, I get it. It would be ridiculous to know all of them. But you don't know any of them in the first one. In this one, there's actually scenes where you learn about the other tributes. Sometimes it's done in a very exposition-heavy way, like, slides on a computer screen. And then there's other times that's just done in dialogue. But it's done in different ways, so it's not super monotonous. Like, that's just good screenwriting. This movie is what The Hunger Games should have been, and in a way it kind of is, because Catching Fire is very much just a rehash of The Hunger Games from a book perspective. It's kind of like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. They're essentially the same movie, but with a few tweaks and better filmmaking with the second one. Having said that, Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, also directed by Francis Lawrence. So I want to talk about these movies at the same time as two separate entities, but at the same time, one big piece. Although the two parts of this are drastically different. In that Part 1 is a lot of tire spinning. It's a lot of doing setup work for the final chapter. It's getting pieces in place, concepts in place. It's never slow. I'm actually surprised how fast this movie moved. I paused to get a drink of water what I thought was 20 minutes in the movie, and I was 50 minutes into this thing. And it gets more into the propaganda war. The role of Mockingjay becomes a propaganda-heavy role for Katniss. So it is a lot of going back and forth between the Capitol and Katniss, making propaganda films, which leads to a lot of screen watching from the actors. But it never is very slow. It always kind of cooks along. It does still look good because Francis Lawrence brought that shooting style from Catching Fire into these two. But, I mean, not much happens. To get you ready to go, the last one's gonna be awesome. A lot of action gonna happen. Man, Part 2 is boring as hell. There is so much walking in this movie. Walking from place to place, walking through a door and following it down a sidewalk. There's just so much walking. Nothing's happening. It just slows everything down to a crawl. It's all too slow. I want to make one thing clear at this point. I don't think that Mockingjay as a book makes a 2-hour movie. There's way too much to it for that. But I also don't think it's a 4-hour and 15-minute one. This thing drags. Most of the revolution happens off camera. And then the movie has Return of the King syndrome, where it has about 10 good endings it could have landed on and just didn't. I don't remember if the book went there, but as a film, you gotta stop at some point in time. Just find a stopping point and stop. You don't need to involve all this other stuff. It's frustrating when there's a good movie to be made there and it's just not done. And I don't think this thing needed to be 2 parts. If anything, Endgame taught us was that people will sit through a 3-hour movie as long as it's good. Don't give me 2 2-hour movies when you can give me 1 3-hour movie that is more cohesive. So that is The Hunger Games. What did you guys think? Have you seen The Hunger Games? I'm betting you have if you're watching this video. Are you guys watching anything else that's cool? I'll see you down in comments, and I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.